Greetings friends, it's me Wayman, and as promised I came on to do a video on the Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon. And this is one of the places where love is expressed in an erotic way. The biblical literature does not hold back when it comes to sex. Everything, and I mean everything, is in and mentioned in the biblical literature. And the Song of Songs is a pretty interesting text. While traditional Judaism views it as a metaphor or as allegory between the divine and Israel, I'm gonna read some sections on that, and maybe go back and read this poetry, and hopefully this video will give you a little bit more background. And at the end, I'll be posting a link over there to Mrs. Wayman 29 reading the Canaanite love poem, and it's very nice. She did it a while back, and we did it being kind of humorous, but you can see how that would relate to this. And also, which we'll get into a little bit later, is love poems coming out of India and Hindu religious literature, which is very fascinating indeed. Just another way to look at the literature. So I'm going to read a section out of the Jewish Study Bible by the JPS TANAKH translation. So here is their intro on the Song of Songs. The Song of Songs in the Tanakh's only extensive discourse on human erotic love. The book consists of a series of poems in which the speech of two lovers is interspersed with occasional comments by other voices. Throughout the poems, the lovers describe themselves and each other and their feelings of love and desire and longing. While the book has no narrative plot, the relationship between the lovers is marked by cycles of absence and presence. The poem, which celebrate the presence of a lover, alternate with poems of longing and poems of invitation. While both lovers speak within the text, the woman is the more active and articulate character. Her experiences, feelings, and perceptions are the central content of the poem. This suggests, to some, that a woman may have authored parts of the song. The song is characterized by a wide range of poetic techniques. The poets draw from the language of natural, domestic, and urban spheres. They use techniques of wordplay, pun, soundplay, repetition, simile, metaphor, and double entendre, E-N-T-E-N-D-R-E, to highlight the relationship between the two lovers. One of the most striking literary features of the song is the oscillation among the different spheres and modes. The poetic voices shift repeatedly from praise to adjuration, from playfulness to violence, and from third person to second person address, creating dynamic movement. The poetic techniques, many of which have parallels in Egyptian and Mesopotamian love poetry, provide an apt vehicle for a literary mirror for the lushness, exuberance, and movement relationship they describe. The compositional history and origin of the Song of Songs remains a matter of debate. Most commentaries agree that the book is a collection of poetic units which were linked by theme, language, and style. These disagreements, however, over the extent of each unit and degree of coherence among the collection. Some scholars insist that the poem is the work of a single author who might have relied on earlier sources or traditions. Others insist that the canonical text is the product of a redactor who edited together pre-existent poems and poetic fragments. The date of composition of the song is also unclear. With the exception of a few references to King Solomon, there is no mention of known historical figures or events, nor do the references to human behavior correlate to attitudes or situations of a particular historical period. In addition, the book contains both archaic language and relatively late words, which makes it difficult to establish a date on linguistic grounds. Contemporary scholars' consensus hypothesizes that the poem probably has its roots in early folk and literary traditions, but was composed or redacted in the 4th or 3rd century BCE. So that's just a little bit of background from the JPS Study Bible. Now I'm going to get Poe's Song of Solomon from the Anchor Bible Commentary. This is a pretty interesting read. You can see this book is quite thick. You would not think that 8 chapters would take up such a big commentary, but it is. It's very in-depth. This goes into the Ugaritic text and everything. And I just want to read from a section in here where it refers to the Hindu text. Ribbon's summarization of his view of the Song of Songs is of interest and is significant as to warrant citation in the concluding paragraphs. It is thus possible to suggest that the Song of Songs was written in the heyday of Judean trade through South Arabia and beyond, by someone who had himself traveled to South Arabia and to the South India, where he had become acquainted with the Tamil poetry, Tamil. So maybe you could look that up. He took over one of his recurrent themes, as well as certain stylistic features. The literary form of developing a theme by dialogue would have been familiar to this man from the Babylonian Assyrian sources and Egyptian literature. He was thus prepared by his experience for making a decisive departure from the Tamil practice by building what in Sangam poetry were short dialogue poems into long work. Though we may possibly discern the Song of Songs shorter units more resembling the Tamil pieces, instead of the vague cases for separation underlying the moods expressed in Tamil poetry. He chose an experience familiar to him and presumably common enough to be recognized by his public for the long absences of young men on commercial expeditions, which is pretty interesting. He continues, in Indian legend, love of human women for gods, particularly Krishna, is found as a theme. Tamil legend, in particular, has amongst its best-known items the story of a young village girl who loved Krishna so much that in her erotic moods she adorned herself for him with flower, change, prepared for offerings to the god's statue. When this was noticed, she was upbraided by her father. She was taken by Krishna to heaven. Expressions of intense love for the god are a prominent feature in the Tamil Shivite poetry. The use of such themes to express the relationship of man to a god may thus have been familiar to the Indians also in a more ancient times. The Judean poet could have been aware of it. Thus, the use of this genre of love poetry of this kind for the expression of religious longing may itself have been borrowed from India, which is pretty interesting. So, I'll be posting a link to this material. Take a look at it, read it through, and I think maybe with this view, it'll give better another way to look at the text, rather than just as some would call biblical pornography. But like I said before, the traditional view is allegorical as God to Israel. So that's pretty interesting. So take care, friends. Check out the links. Remember, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking